A very good evening to everyone present. My name is Anya George from WRI-India, and it is my great pleasure to welcome you all to this very pertinent roundtable and working paper launch. The metro rail in India is one of the country's biggest public transportation projects, and it is seen as a reliable, safe, and convenient mode of traveling across cities. It is a key part in India's quest to decarbonize its road emissions and achieving its net zero targets. But metro ridership has been impacted by the lack of efficient last-mile planning. So now, to help set the context for this discussion, I would like to call upon Dr. O.P. Agarwal, Senior Advisor, WRI India, to address the gathering.
I've been asked to give a little welcome. I don't think I need to welcome this group. Very nice of you to be here. This is a topic of great interest to me personally, because I have been involved with the metro from a very long time. But what does hurt me a lot now is, why is the metro not getting used as much as it was projected to be used? And clearly, last mile is a big issue that one is hearing all about. And I'm looking forward to the presentation of the work that Sudip and your team, you've done. Some bit that I read was very exciting to me, really looking forward to what it's really suggesting. But that's all part of the discussions at this stage. Welcome everyone, delighted that you're here. Looking forward to your interventions. Back to you.
We are fortunate that Mr. Loknath Behra, Managing Director at KMRL, has joined us virtually to provide a keynote address.
Agrawal sir, pranam sir. And very distinguished gathering, and this is very interesting that you actually arranged this meeting when the Delhi is flooded. And you must be wondering that what best last mile and first mile connectivity is required. Or there was a beautiful photograph in which I saw the metro station flooded, and they said whether we require a metro or a boat. So this kind of situation also is inevitable. But as I said, as Agrawal sir said, that the last mile and first mile connectivity is very important, especially in metros, smaller metros, unlike the Delhi metro, because Delhi, it is a absolute necessity to avail the services of metro because the distances are very long and metro is very well spread, and therefore it is very important. But in a smaller metro like ours or other cities, unless until we have the good first mile and last mile connectivity, we don't entice or attract the people to come to the metro. You know, taking the example of Cochin, which I'll tell you that metro is costlier than the buses. And the alignment is such that it is actually competing with the bus routes. So a particular person, if he wants to travel a particular distance by paying 40 rupees for the metro ticket, he can actually travel in 25 rupees in a bus. So in that particular situation, what happens is that all these exercises saying that we will do last mile and first mile connectivity and ease of travel, etc., makes a small dent only, because it is question of ultimately the money. Well, that is actually the flip side of it. Other part is that how do we talk about the first mile and last mile connectivity relating to the metro railway? I mean, metro rails. Well, there are different methods tried in different knee-jerk fashion in our country. I do not think there is a particular concerted effort anywhere by any metro to have a foolproof system to attract the people. Hyderabad has done something, Chennai has done something, we have also done something. Well, but those things are not very standardized, and it is all, as I said, very knee-jerk. For example, now we are now contemplating of actually having some electric buses and some electric autos, which we have already done, and to have to run as feeder services to have the first mile and last mile connectivity. Well, that is actually, then there is also a particular view that how this much of money which has been invested for procuring these buses or auto or rickshaws have to be, gained back. It will not, because we consider it as a service, and it is a sovereign assurance to the people of this country that we will provide good transport. That is the one part. The other part is that this kind of feeder services, it is not free. It has a actually price tag. For example, my one feeder service, which actually connects the first station of the Kochi metro called Alwa metro station to the airport, is actually stupendously successful. Because most of the people from the city, they travel to Alwa metro station, paying say 30, 40 rupees, then go from that particular place to the around 10 or 12 kilometers to the airport by using the electric feeder service buses, which we run, and they pay around 50 bucks. So by paying around 90 rupees, they reach the airport. Just if you take a particular cab, it will it will cost you around 1,200 rupees. So that is actually the benefit which is actually successful. But we actually tried some other routes. It was not that successful, because I don't know what is the reason for that. We actually ran circular services to pick up people to come to the metro. So what happened is that some people, when we actually, my general manager operation is also here. He was actually running it for last 2 years. He'll bear me out. He said that, look, if you take 50, actually 30 people are traveling in that particular bus, only 10 or 12 people go to the metro. Other people actually use some other transport. So they found it very convenient to go by like this. So, okay, that is also most of the other feeder routes which we operated, it was not that successful. But it should not also deter, because it will take time. The people actually decide their travel plan in a manner which we cannot probably understand so easily. So what we are trying to do is right now is this. This can be replicated anywhere. We wanted to virtualize everything. So to make the ease of travel. So what we have done is that, look, we have water metro. Okay, water metro is now, if you buy one ticket, one particular ticket, or if you use the Kochi metro card, you can travel in both. Even if you buy one ticket in Kochi metro or in water metro, you can travel in both. So if you are actually downloading the QR code, that QR code can be interchangeably actually used. Then what we have done right now, we have this feeder auto rickshaws and the feeder buses. That is also on an app. So you actually download the QR code. You are actually paying, is a cashless transaction. So you don't have to pay by paying, and you just scan the QR code, which are there in the bus as well as in the auto rickshaw, and it takes the money out. So what now, the best thing is that now we are trying to integrate all the 4 QR codes together so that it will be there residing in your phone and you can actually use that. In the meantime, what we are actually now, by 31st of December, we have put an ambitious target that all our RFT tickets, everything should be residing only in your phone, and including the actually Kochi metro card. So what will happen, this is actually, you don't carry anything. If you are carrying your phone, which is actually used for this particular virtualization or what we have done, so you can use it anywhere, and it can be actually, you can open any AFC gate, or it can go to, you can go by any of the feeder services. And more, the city services are now coming towards us saying that humko bhi isme shamil kar do, kind of things also is coming. So this is one of the experiments we started doing it without even going to the ONDC and other people who are doing integrating. Very pioneering efforts are being done. So what is happening is that here it is a Kerala society, is a little techno society. Here people love using technology. So it is going to be, because more and more people now, they don't buy tickets. They only use QR coded things in the phone and go to the AFC gates. So that encouraged us to do this one. So what will happen is that this is a kind of integration as well as first mile, last mile connectivity. The challenge is that what we are now working on is that if I am traveling in a metro, before I reach the station, can I hail an auto rickshaw by using my mobile phone without even silence and other things and get it confirmed? And by the time I get down, the auto rickshaw is also there. I just scan my QR code and go to that place without making any cash payment. See, this we are also working so that there will be ease of travel by using technology. And this in one way will be there, but there are physical part of the, what you call is the first mile and last mile connectivity. The NMT project is there, this is there, that is there. But the thing is actually there. What is there, we have seen abroad. That kind of system has not come so far, to my knowledge. That integration has not come. So I am sure that younger generation who are techno savvy and they will able to actually think more and more how to do this particular thing. If a news reader in Odisha TV is actually created by AI. So I was telling today in the meeting that can we have a AI created train and a driver who will be there to drive this particular thing. That is also possible. It is not actually that it's not possible. The thing is, and technology is growing in that particular manner. So what I suggest, because Agrawal Sahab is there, he's an extremely revered person, I mean, extremely knowledgeable. Actually, we should have a uniform policy relating to this first mile, last mile connectivity. All the experiments done at various metros can be actually clubbed together, the best things, and put it as a policy document or a guidance document, which can be followed in the other metros, because I understand that more than 80 towns and cities will have metro rail by 2047. So these particular things should be considered from now onwards so that we, the people of this country, get the benefit of this particular. This is what I wanted to tell, sir. And thank you very much for inviting me to talk to this August gathering. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Behra, for your insights. Mr. Jaideep, OST for Urban Transport at Mohua, was scheduled to deliver a keynote address, but unfortunately he was not able to join. So, as you know, WRI India and Toyota Mobility Foundation have created a working paper based on insights from 3 cities across India. This is one of the largest such studies in metro commutes in India. And I would now like to invite a few dignitaries to the stage to officially launch the working paper. I call upon Mr. Pras Ganesh, Executive Director, Toyota Mobility Foundation, Mr. Pawan Mulukutla, Director, WRI India, Soumya M., Project Associate, WRI India, Archana Balachandran, Project Associate, WRI India, and Sudeep and Alok from WRI India to take the stage, please.
I think we need to have Dr. O.P. Agarwal, sir. We started just sharing this stamp. Initiative was started in 2016, and sir's guidance helped to move this to 7 cities. I think that has been a wonderful way that we moved to 7 cities. Big learning, and I think personally for the whole team, it was, sir, your support and understanding that really made this happen. And we have summarized all these learnings. Almost 7,000 commuters have been surveyed to really understand how we have done this and translated into an action. I think one of the very interesting find is the cost time versus for a very specific mode. And that is, I think, the whole crux of the paper from each city, that how do you really define the last mile based upon the cost and the time parameters, which are obviously the impedance. So I think the best way to inaugurate this paper will be with OP sir and actually Pras. So why don't we join here on the stage?
Thank you everyone for participating in the launch of this working paper. I would like to now call upon my colleague Alok Mukherjee, who is actually the lead author of this working paper, to deliver a few key insights from this working paper.
Good evening, everyone. Given that we've just launched the working paper, it would probably be helpful if, there were a few insights for all of you to understand what we've actually addressed in this publication. So we're looking at improving access to metro rail systems in Indian cities, obviously with the aim of getting more commuters to use these services. Now, the context, I think the fact that Indian cities have mobility issues in terms of congestion, in terms of emissions, in terms of road crash fatalities are fairly well known. I don't really need to dwell upon these issues very much. What is also clear is that the Indian government has been investing quite heavily in developing metro rail systems, high quality mass transit systems across Indian cities. And you'll see that there's been a particularly stark growth over the past 10 years or so. And a significant amount of capital has been invested in these services to get them to work fairly well. Having said that, there exist significant opportunities to increase ridership to metro rail systems. Many of them have performed not as well as the ridership projections that were made in detailed project reports for these systems. Why? There are many reasons, but one key reason that has emerged a consensus across many spaces, whether it's media reports, whether it's earlier research that WRI has done, or even in government policy documents, is the fact that poor last mile connectivity or poor access to metro rail systems either disincentivizes users from continuing to go to metro rail stations and also prevents users from switching to the metro in the first place. There have been several policy interventions in this regard since 2017. The Mohua Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs came up with a metro rail policy stipulating very clearly that cities that are submitting proposals for metro rail systems need to include a clear plan for feeder services to receive central financial assistance. The Motor Vehicles Act has also been amended to ensure that more players can actually provide last mile connectivity services to the metro. So while these efforts have been taken, the situation unfortunately has not improved meaningfully on the ground even as of 2023. Why? So the gap over here in some ways is fairly fundamental. Who uses the metro? We still don't know very clearly what is the average metro user, so what do those demographics look like, which is a fairly important component of planning what kind of services might work for them. Because there are many different users, and for any of you who were in the previous session, we have commuters with fairly diverse mobility needs. So how do you understand from different segments of users what it is they prefer in their first or last mile commute? For some people, it might be time saving. For some, it may be cost. For some, it may be secure safety. Some, it may be comfort. And once you start to understand this, you can start moving towards providing services that actually work and meet these requirements. Unfortunately, that also, since we don't clearly understand who uses the metro, this understanding is still lacking. And finally, how do you actually, once you start collecting this data and using these processes, that's when you can start coming up with a data-driven approach to provide quality last mile. This too, unfortunately, has not happened. We've worked with several metro rail agencies. They have last mile planning departments, and many of them are doing very good work. They're quite sincere about it. But what unfortunately still happens is that last mile planning is still very much driven by the intuition of local level planners. There is no standardized data collection process and analysis and implementation to ensure that if we know that certain kinds of users reside in a particular area close to a metro station, this is what they would prefer and this is how it might work. So all of this actually just spins back to, how do we ensure that there is a commuter-centric planning approach to design last-mile services that commuters actually want. And to some extent, this was explored in the last session. We've taken this forward in a slightly more academic approach that feeds into, hopefully, long-term policy and decision-making. So this is the research that we've done. This is the largest published data set that looks at metro users in India. We sampled over 7,200 metro users across 3 cities in India, looking at their demographics. So who is using the metro right now? How are they accessing the metro? And revealing, what their preferences are. How much are people willing to pay? How much time are people willing to wait for a metro rail service? How do they prioritize certain things? And this just feeds into, the gap that I was discussing earlier. Now, how do we make sure this process is more data-driven? And how do we ensure that planning is commuter-centric? We know that somebody wants a particular kind of service. Can we viably provide it in a certain area? It cannot be driven purely based on, the operational convenience of operating a particular feeder mode in a particular area, independent of what commuters want. So let's just get into it straight. I don't want to take too much time also because we have a very interesting roundtable coming up. Who uses the metro? The first thing that we looked at was what's the age demographic of people using the metro. And there's a fairly clear finding here. While there are differences across the cities, what we see is that it's primarily a young demographic using the metro. So either between 19 to 25 or 26 to 35. And these users primarily use the metro to commute either for work or for education. Delhi exhibits a slightly more well-rounded profile, I think also because its metro network has existed for longer. So we do see a slightly higher share of leisure trips there as well. Now, income. This is, of course, a very important aspect, because if we don't understand how much people earn, the segments using the metro, then it becomes very difficult to define what kind of prices would work for them. What are those last mile fares that work? How do you ensure that you're not pricing people out of using the metro simply because their first and last mile costs are too high? Again, over here, what you see is that it is primarily a lower middle income and a middle income demographic using it. About 30% of our sample using the metro, reports a household income, and this is household income, not individual income, of between 10 to 20,000 rupees a month. And about maybe 40% of the remaining sample reports between 20 to 40,000 rupees a month. What this is telling you in some ways also is that a lot of these users are probably shifting from other modes of public transport in the first place, and that usually would mean the bus, which also means that these people are going to be fairly price sensitive, so which makes it quite difficult actually to design effective last mile services. And this also reflects in the kind of modes that are being used. Across all three cities, 3/4 of our sample is either walking or using a shared low-cost mode. And the shared low-cost mode could be either paratransit, a shared auto, or a bus. Now, there are differences in usage patterns across these three cities, but there is one consistent trend. In all three cities, walking was the most frequently reported mode of access to metro stations, followed by paratransit, shared autos, and finally by feeder bus services. One caveat over here, I think that is very important to mention is, I just said that we have a particularly young demographic using the metro. They're also more likely to be fairly fit and willing to walk to metro stations even when pedestrian infrastructure isn't necessarily great. So I think one takeaway from this is that we really do need to focus a little bit more on improving pedestrian infrastructure, because it's likely excluding a lot of your older or less mobile demographics from accessing metro stations in the first place. Okay. How much are people willing to pay, given some of the income distribution stats that I've talked about earlier? It's not very high. The average trip distances and costs that we're looking at, most people for short distance trips, that would be maybe less than a kilometer or so, would be willing to pay 5 rupees or so. And for people who access the metro for slightly longer last mile trip distances, you would look at a range of maybe 15 rupees at most. Now, one caveat here is, as metro rail systems expand across India, as people take longer trips on the metro, their last mile trip distances are also likely to increase. And that may mean that people may be willing to pay a little bit more. But broadly speaking, 5 to 15 rupees are the kind of fares that people have exhibited that they're willing to pay. And this corresponds to some sort of shared service. So what this means is that when you are designing services to a metro station, you need a fairly good understanding of the spatial demography around this metro station to understand if it is a particularly, at most stations, you would probably want a low fare service. Some stations that have higher income demographics, that's where you can start prioritizing maybe more innovative services, more tailored services for users who may prefer convenience and comfort in accessing the metro station. One important statistic over here is that we see in all three cities, women on average travel shorter distances to access the metro than men, but they pay more. In some cases, this is because they are forced into taking slightly more expensive modes to reach the metro station, maybe because of safety concerns. What we've also seen is that a lot of women tend to trip chain, which is to combine multiple errands in a trip to a metro station, and existing fare structures tend to penalize them a little bit. So there are some gender differences here in how much people are actually paying. How long are people willing to wait? Not very long, to be honest. What we were looking at, this is a case study where users had a choice. They had access to both paratransit services, frequent shared autos, as well as relatively frequent buses. What we're seeing here is that most people are willing to wait about 5 minutes. And if your service runs at a frequency, where it comes maybe once in every more than 10 minutes, then it doesn't really make sense. Not many people are willing to wait for it. And this is also because people take the metro because it's reliable. But if you have to wait for more than 10 minutes to get to a metro station, or 10 minutes at the metro station to go, from a metro station to your destination, that reliability in many ways is destroyed. And that in many ways is what, we'd call the metro rail paradox. You have an incredibly reliable metro rail system that is marred by fairly unreliable, unsafe, and in many cases uncomfortable access. So to summarize this, the Indian commuter is actually quite demanding. They want services that are low fare and also quite frequent. They're not willing to wait very long. Now, when we look at metro rail planning and when we look at policy documents, the metro rail policy of 2017, for example, one term that is used very frequently is the catchment area of a metro station, which is essentially the area around a metro station where people would actually come to access the metro station. Usually we look at it in terms of a kilometer distance, right? People access a metro station if it's within 3 kilometers. In some cases, it could be a little bit more. But a very interesting finding we found from the 3 cities that we surveyed, which is Bengaluru, Delhi, and Nagpur, is that it's actually a function of time. Users across income groups, across these 3 cities, consider it viable to access a metro station if they can get to it within 20 minutes. If it's less time, of course, that's great. But more than 20 minutes, most people say, it doesn't really make sense for me to go to a metro station in the first place. I'll look at an alternative mode of transport. What are some of the implications of this? So if you have a particular metro station here and this is a catchment region, people can access perhaps this space within 20 minutes. If there's congestion around the metro station, if services aren't frequent, which means people have to wait for a lot longer, which means they can travel shorter distances in 20 minutes, your catchment region actually comes down, which means the viable area for a metro station and potential ridership also comes down. On the other hand, if you can deploy services that are either more frequent or faster in some way, you can expand the catchment area of a metro station, get more people to use it. So I think this is a fairly important finding. We need to look at how we can get more people to a metro station within 20 minutes. And of course, if it takes less time, that's even better. So what are the implications for this? I think a lot of it just boils down to we need to understand certain things better. Firstly, what do different user segments prefer? We have some very quick statistics over here, and of course it's detailed in a lot more detail in the working paper itself. I can't get into all of it here. Who's using the metro right now? Who's not using the metro? And what actually distinguishes it? Is it a function of somebody's user demographics? Is it clearly a function of someone's trip patterns? A combination of both? Who resides and works around a metro station? So then you can understand how different user preferences play into what modes you can run. And finally, how much demand is actually there around a metro station? Because a lot of policy says that we need to run more feeder buses to metro stations. But, as I think even in the keynote address now, there have been comments saying that a lot of feeder bus services have failed. And, in a lot of cities, state transport undertaking, that is bus operators, have tried to run dedicated feeder services, which have not done very well. And, they've been scrapped, citing a lack of viability. And that adds to the uncertainty for a metro commuter because one day you go to the station and that bus just doesn't exist anymore. So I think what a lot of this is actually coming to is you need to understand how many people are going to a metro station and be very cognizant of the fact that people are not willing to wait very long. So if there is a lower volume of demand, then you need to look at a slightly lower capacity shared vehicle that still runs at a high frequency. So that way you're ticking the box of not making commuters wait too long and also giving them low-cost services that work. So for example, here are some very, simple schematics that we drew up to look at how you can plan different services to metro stations and ensure that they're also viable to operate. So for example, if you look at the vertical axis, it's a schema of, the amount of demand on a particular corridor from a metro station to a nearby area, last mile demand. At different volumes of demand, different services start to make a little bit more sense. At low volumes of demand, a high capacity feeder bus may not really work. And obviously, you also have to understand what are the fares that are being charged. And if it is a particularly low-income region, then you have to make sure that whatever you're providing is actually affordable. Otherwise, it's not a particularly equitable access thing. Similarly, what we also see is that there are clear usage patterns in terms of how far people are traveling and what kind of modes they use. So longer distances, buses tend to be quite popular. For shorter trip distances, if you want a shared service, it's usually paratransit, some form of shared autos. Fairly simple schematic, but I think this also illustrates what's still not being considered in last mile service planning. And I think it will be good if we can start building upon this a little bit more. So finally, what are some of the takeaways from this? We need to keep the commuter at the center. And I think this has been emphasized in both the previous session and this one. So understand what people want at the first stage. And this should even be when you're preparing the project reports. You can't have a very unrealistic assumption that last mile connectivity around any station will be excellent to start with. Then what you need to do, start by prioritizing non-motorized infrastructure, pedestrian and cycle infrastructure, and low-cost modes of stations that have a slightly higher income demographic around. Then we can start looking at how innovation can get more existing non-users to take the metro. that you really need to understand, again, spatial demography around a station. And I think lastly, but very importantly, there needs to be a periodic data collection process, understanding who is using the metro, who's not using the metro, what those preferences look like. And there needs to be a proper process to actually collect, analyze this data, and then come out with actionable insights that different agencies take to ensure that we can actually provide quality last mile services. I'm going to stop here because I think we could move into the roundtable discussion. I think we have given out a brochure that allows people to access the working paper itself. So if you want, to understand this in a little bit more detail, I do urge you to read the paper itself. And I think that's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Alok, for those insights. And to build on this momentum from the working paper, we have an insightful roundtable discussion ahead. This roundtable comprises stakeholders from several areas of the metro policy ecosystem and aims to chart a way forward for metro policy on last mile planning using data-driven insights. So I'll hand it back over to Sudeep and Alok, who will be your moderators for this session.
Thank you, Anya. One of the key things to kind of understand as we have this discussion is that today we have about 16 cities where the metros are operational. Tomorrow there are 24 more. There are 24 more cities that are in the pipeline, and in the future, I think there will be more cities. Now, this is an infrastructure where the government is heavily investing on, and it's also an opportunity for us to for us to help decarbonize transportation sector in cities. If we are able to, address many of the last mile multimodal integration aspects, the aim in this conversation is to understand how learnings from papers like this, and there are a few other papers also there are a few other papers that also kind of inform how last mile needs to be addressed. How do we institutionalize some of these learnings so that when these new infrastructure comes in, we ensure that they are well integrated, we ensure that they are accessible by all, and it is inclusive for everyone involved. And this is what we would like this session to focus on. OP sir, to begin with, I have a question. We would like to pose the first question to you. You have been involved in the entire framing of the NUTP. And now, given that metros are such heavy investments and we do need to leverage them, where do you think the biggest opportunities for policy and planning to be integrated into this system would be?
Let me step back a little bit. To sort of recount why have we reached a situation like this. Remember when the Delhi Metro came up, its predecessor was the Calcutta Metro. And the experience with the Calcutta Metro was 20 years of trying to build that. So when the Delhi Metro started, the main focus was, can we do it in 5 years? It took 20 years to do that. Can we do it in 5 years? That was the focus. The focus was all about good civil engineering, good project management. Now, they did that. But after that, when we've moved on to metros, we've not changed out of that. How quickly can we do it? Today, we have metros telling me that we've done it in 3.5 years. So what? So I think that mindset hasn't changed. There was sometime in 2016 or 17, I think you spoke about it, Alok. You had this thing that the ministry came up with was the metro rail policy. To me, it was a wonderful policy because it's not about metro rail per se, but it's about what all you need to do to get a metro rail approved. And that looked at a very comprehensive approach. I think that was a brilliant policy. The problem there was, it was very complex. How do you make so many things come together? And to me, the big question was, who's going to do this? If you're building a metro, you have a company that's going to build the metro. But we have another session going on TOD parallelly to this. The question I've always asked is, who's going to do the TOD? In most cities, when I go and ask them, so metro people will do it. The metro people are building the metro. TOD is not your job. So I think the institution is very important. And in the NUTP itself, there is a mention about every city of a certain size and above should be thinking of a unified metropolitan transport authority. Unfortunately, Kochi, Mr. Behra is probably still online. Kochi is the one city that has legislation by which they have set up the Unified Metropolitan Transport Authority. No other city, to the best of my knowledge, has it by legislation. The important thing is not really the legislation, but the fact that legislation gives it a slightly stronger mandate. But even though these have come, these have not really taken off. Again, the complexity of it all. And I think our effort today really has to be how to set up these institutions. Now, setting it up by a legislation or setting it up by an order is a piece of paper. The difficult thing is what after that. Because you have so many other institutions that are already entrenched. This is a new baby that has come up and is supposedly meant to take over everything else. Who's going to allow that to happen? So I think how do we build up these unified metropolitan transport authorities is what is going to help look beyond the metro to make the metro successful. Having said that, I must really compliment you on this work, Sudeep. I was delighted to see the kind of questions you've tried to answer. These are questions I've kept asking myself. Never had the time to research it, but today I really look forward to reading this. Thanks a lot again.
Yeah, thank you, sir. So I think now that we have a broader context, I would actually like to move straight to the metro rail agencies themselves, because we have quite a few who have joined today, either virtually or in person. So I think I'll start actually with DMRC. We have Mr. S. Hook here. We have talked about the need for more data to actually understand who's using the metro and how to get them there. But from a data standpoint, as a metro rail agency, what kind of information would help you prioritize different last mile forms and modes at stations?
Yeah. So as of now, we have been trying to provide last and first mile connectivity to our commuters. So to a certain extent, we are successful, but still a long way to go. So we have the users who, some of them, 20% of them use their cars. Some of them use e-rickshaws, auto rickshaws, then buses, then some come by walk also. So, but these are not that much organized or that much programmed. See, we had feeder bus services we provided, and it was not successful. So then we used e-buses, electric buses. Then those are already taken over by Delhi government, and they are trying to provide the solution, at least to all the metro stations through their. They are trying to deploy many more electric buses of mid-size buses, not the big one, say 9-meter size. So which we initially procured around 100 buses and then now handed over to them. So they are in a process to acquire more number of buses and to cover all the stations in the name of some mohalla buses or something like that. So I think that is going to help us to give the benefit to the commuters and increase their. And another thing that e-rickshaws, as I told, around 15-20% people are using e-rickshaws, but that is also not that much organized and that is not permitted in entire Delhi. Some areas in central Delhi, South Delhi, e-rickshaws are not allowed because of obvious reasons, because of congestion on the road and other things. So, and the other option, these e-autos also we don't have sufficient in number. Those are very, very limited, and some now new things are coming up, and new organizations are coming up and trying to introduce those services in the name of e-autos. Already we have some, about a few numbers, and we have to provide it and to cover all the metro stations to give this facility to the commuters. Because this, as was told by the MD of KMRCL rightly, that if we don't provide the connectivity to the commuters, they will not prefer it. Because we, in DMRC also, we have about 6 million passenger journeys every day. But I believe that if we can provide better facilities, better opportunities to the commuters, this will increase further. Because these commuters, when they feel that I have got options through, so he should not be under compulsion, I have to go by bus only or by e-rickshaws only. He should have the option. He should be able to plan his journey, that this is the time I am moving out of my house and I have to reach my office at this time. And from office also coming back, he can plan it. So all these facilities should be available to them. And next is that these facilities, this service providers in the form of e-autos, e-rickshaws, they are also not organized. They are not properly planned. As far as they are not data driven. It is just we have in certain areas we have given some permit to them and given them some facilities to park the vehicles they are providing. It is still emerging and evolving, and we have to plan it as some WRI is working on that. Some other agency is working on that. Then our partner JICA is also working very much on that. So I think in the near future we'll develop the mechanism and the apps also, so that it will help the commuters to book their rides much in advance, and they can plan their journeys and they can get the comfort. They should feel that my journey and comfort is assured. Then only it will be helpful, and we can promote this last and first mile connectivity.
All right, thank you. So I think the important point on the fact that informal services don't necessarily have much data in the first place. So how do we make that a more data-driven process so we can give commuters what they actually want? I think we've also have Mr. Munivira Gowda, who is DGM Connectivity from BMRCL, who's joined. I'd actually like to pose the same question to him. What is the kind of data or information that you or BMRCL would find useful to decide what kind of last mile services should be deployed at stations?
Good afternoon, sir. This is Mr. Niyar. In respect of this, we require a detailed commuter survey needs to be undertaken to understand the same. Some of the parameters to be considered to select a metro station would be land use in and around the station and terminal stations, and also the existing mode available for the last mile connectivity, and it is effectiveness like feeder services, cycles, PTS, and IPT. So this is most important for our survey. Again, the commuter survey must capture the following, that is, socioeconomic characteristics of the commuters along with their complete travel pattern from origin destination, comfort, time, safety, reliability, and cost incurred in the last mile's connectivity should also be done, understand the preferred transport mode of the commuter. Again, type of user group that includes elderly, women, children, pregnant women, and people with disabilities. Challenges faced by the commuters of first and last mile connectivity. Again, a non-metro user survey will also help in assessing the gaps and challenges encountered people who are unable to use metro for their commuter. Again, secondary data collection of the IPT available near the metro station along with their cost per kilometer needs to be taken into note. Again, comprehensive analysis needs to be done from the collected data, analysis the gap in last mile connectivity. Again, at the same time, there should also be supporting regulations of framework and improved modal integration for improved last mile connectivity system. For example, after introduction of free bus service, riders of women commuters in Karnataka, demand for free bus service increasing. So presently, our BMTC, which is operating feeder services, is about more than 107 feeder services are there operating per day. And also, in 26 metro stations and 25 routes, so about 831 trips they are operating. In addition, recently we introduced prefixed auto fare bus system in some of the metro stations in Bangalore. It is actually working well. So after this, we want to increase to other metro stations also. People are comfortable and happy with this kind of system. Upon this, our Delta is also introducing this PBS system in the metro stations of 10 metro stations starting with. Later on, they want to expand it to other systems. This kind of system, definitely we can come across, saw the entire issue of feeder buses and last mile connectivity. So in this way, we are introducing and we try to sort out the issues where the problems are coming up, and by knowing the survey details, we can also go ahead in introducing effectively the last mile connectivity. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, sir. That's quite an elaborate answer, and I think also touching upon several of BMRCL's efforts in coordination with BMTC in the city to improve access to metro stations in Bangalore. Now, I'm at the risk of repeating the same question again. We also have Mr. Gokul from KMRL. So I'd like to ask the same question again. What are the kind of data or data sets that you feel could help KMRL better plan last mile connectivity to metro stations?
Hi, good evening, everyone. I'm hope I'm audible to everyone as I'm online.
Loud and clear.
Thank you. So at KMRL, we have been trying to understand what is the basic data requirement that you need to take up, and as well as what is the need, baseline need of the commuters. So what we tried to do was to do a small survey on first line and last mile requirement of the commuters, and around we did a small survey for 800-900 people, and very interesting results came up. And we could see that the origin of the journey for most people were around 1 to 2 kilometers, and then which is 45%, and then surprisingly 30% of them was above 5 kilometers. So there is a very interesting gap of 2 to 5 kilometers in between, where where our passengers were not actually coming from. So I think this 2 to 4 or 5 kilometers is where the intermediate paratransit should be focusing on, because above 5 kilometers, definitely the buses take care, and we've got a very successful operation of the airport metro. The bus, which I also feel is that there are 3-4 key challenges regarding this. First is having a consistency of operation. Because when we started, we had only around 250 passengers on the airport line for 3 buses. But over 6 months, when we could reduce the headway as well as the improve the operations and make sure that despite we were taking losses, we were putting the buses there, it improved up to 1,200 people a day. So around 400 to 450 people use one single bus each day to travel from a terminal station, metro station to the airport, which is very encouraging for us. But as our MD was also mentioning, this might not work in other routes, where smaller circular routes were not giving you that kind of so I think that it should be a combination of different strategies to look at, because the travel pattern is quite different in different cities. So I wouldn't be able to take some learnings from other cities, but I wouldn't be able to just copy the whole thing and paste it and then expect it to work for Kochi. So what we feel is that there is a lack of data as to where these commuters are coming from. What is the need of the commuter? We surprisingly found that 50% of our egress of the passenger were using the pedestrians who were walking, which was only 25% at the ingress or accessing the metro station. So these are different for different metro stations. So we need to understand what is the shape of your the travel pattern of your commuters. We expect to use our VLTD devices that we have put on the autos that we have purchased. We have around 75 autos and other 35 autos which we have given on a feeder license. So what we have insisted is to have a VLTD device, vehicle location tracking device, in these vehicles, so that at least now, as this vehicle starts to ply, because trust me, there is no perfect way to launch a first and last mile connectivity service. There is no, there is no perfect solution to this. So we need to be on our toes and then keep on trying to find out the solution as and when this we are launching, and then we need to experiment. We need to understand. Maybe we have share autos during the peak and the morning and the peak hours, and during the lean hours we can allow them to use as a non-share auto. Because at the end of the day, these systems fail if those running who are actually driving these vehicles don't generate a profit. So coming to a profit thing, that another thing is financing this last mile and first mile connectivity. Where most as I'm sure, like most finance people would question you regarding why this is not giving you that kind of money that other investment is not giving. So return of interest is not very high for last and first mile connectivity investment, because it takes time. It has to be there for some time before people will start using it regularly. So these are, I feel, a few of the challenges. So what we are trying to set up is a data to garner data from live running of these autos. So we'll soon be having some VLTD data to understand, which I also feel would be very critical for the whole metro system as well, to understand where the passengers are coming from, not just for the last and first mile connectivity. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So I think that's a fairly complex answer. One is just the complexity of user decision making, the kind of data that is required, and also feeding into the fact that we may also need more real-time data to assess how the system is performing and how well that feeds into what commuters are actually looking for. All right, so now we've looked at Metro Rail Agency in the North, DMRC2 from the South. I think I'd like to move to the West as well. We have Farah Irani, who works with the Mumbai Metro Rail Corporation and who's also authored an issue brief on how we can improve access to metro system. How would you answer this question?
Good evening, everyone. Mumbai Metro recognizes that we are living in an interconnected world, a data-rich world, and Mumbai Metro currently there is 44 kilometers which is operational. There is another 337 kilometers more. We are quite in a nascent stage, and we recognize this is the right time for us to intervene when it comes to last mile connectivity. I believe that the biggest data set that is available and could be put to use is with the metro authorities themselves. It is the ridership data which is available. How does this help into translating effective last mile connectivity? Is we can assess the alighting and the boarding of the commuters. We can recognize the high demand stations. I'll give you an example of the line that I'm working on. I work on Metro Line 3, which is the underground line from Kolaba, Bandra, Seeps. From there, we have recognized, based on the ridership data, we have recognized interchange stations with the intercity and suburban railway networks, which is Churchgate, Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj Terminus. We have Mahalakshmi and Mumbai Central stations. Along with that, we have also looked at different metro interchanges. So Marol station with Metro Line 1 of Mumbai. There is line BKC station with Metro Line 2B. And not only that, we also have government offices, Vidhan Bhavan, which is in the south of Mumbai, and the north of Mumbai, we have Seeps area where the SEZ is there. So this ridership data is what we have identified as our main core. Yes, apart from that, we have the origin and destination data, which will help us identify the travel modes of the commuters, the time taken, the distance traveled. Those kind of analysis can be done. Next important, I feel, is the land use mapping that needs to be done, especially in a land-starved city like Mumbai. We need to identify land to make provisions for bus bays, for IPT stops and things like that. Notwithstanding all of this, there is the necessity to integrate with the existing modes of transport. One simple example to be given, apart from the other, of course, IPTs and things like that, best bus services in Mumbai review their network every 6 months or whenever a metro line is getting operational. The idea of this, helping and talking to the metro authorities and the best services could talk to each other, that the best buses need not compete with the metro, but it should rather feed into the metro. So these kind of data would help. Of course, there is no denying, and everybody has emphasized enough on the commuter feedback. But one important thing which all of us, at least the metro authorities, look into are the cost-benefit analysis. The kind of capital that we are investing in providing, the kind of time that we are investing in stakeholder meetings and things like that. We need to have some sort of data in our hands and to judge whether these initiatives that we are planning for last mile connectivity are financially viable and are giving us potential returns in terms of increasing the number of ridership. So yeah, these are, of course, there are more, but these are the major ones that we are looking at.
Yeah, thank you. I think that's interesting. One, of course, is starting with data that is already available with metro rail systems and leveraging them properly. And the other, I think, just being a periodicity of analysis, because just like cities, metro rail systems are also evolving. So we shouldn't just be basing it off static data that has not been updated in a long span of time. So now we've looked at various different metro systems in India, but I think it'll be useful at this point to take a small step back and look at, I would actually go back to Pras now. You've been closely involved in our work in India, of course, and in TMS work across other geographies. But what are the global insights and processes you feel that, may be more applicable in India, and, what can we learn really from them?
Yeah, I think when we are starting to talk about global insights, I think the first thing, as I always keep talking about, is the fact that mobility is pretty much hyper-local. There are methodologies that we can transfer from other regions, but in terms of the behavior is very unique to each city, or each even particular area within a city as well. So we need to kind of consider those elements. So the biggest thing that I do believe needs to be considered is the methodology, and the ability to utilize that methodology in other areas. So, for example, during this particular stamp process, we used a four-step kind of thinking, which is first research on the ground to understand exactly what is the commuter requirements, both people who are utilizing the metro and even people who are not utilizing the metro. We need to equally understand from both of them. Then it's really about the stakeholder engagement to try and understand everyone's perspectives, because each person is really looking at it from their own perspective, and each of them actually have a lot of unconscious bias towards what they want to achieve towards it. But if we try to identify what is the appropriate upper goal, I think we should kind of get people to focus upon that. The third element is really about incubating ideas with the private sector as well, because it is necessary for the element of profitability to be incorporated for people for first mile, last mile to really work. And then the final element is to have a proper PDCA or improvement, continuous improvement. We should not be so rigid in our methodology to think that we know once we introduce a particular system, that system is going to be exactly the same way 5 years later. What I do want to mention is people are talking a lot about the fact that since 2016, we still haven't seen appropriate usage or uptake of the metro. But if we take the example, especially of Japan or some of these other markets as well, it takes time. But with the maturity, you do see a shift where people do recognize that the public transportation becomes the skeleton or the kind of core in which transportation needs to be considered. So what we do think is that with more time, you will see shifts in mobility. Even in the white paper, we did see that Delhi Metro, which was the most mature, has a different demographic shift when compared to a newer metro. So I think it does take some time, and we do need some patience in the process of getting people acclimatized to what is the benefit of public transportation. Thank you.
Thank you, Pras. I think, again, this aspect of periodically evaluating where we are, I think that's a point that's been emphasized, and also that we should be a little bit more patient in waiting for some of these systems to become a little bit more mature and comprehensive across cities. Okay, so now I think we have some representatives from different development organizations and multilateral banks who are also here, and they play a very important role in investing in such projects and enabling them to scale up at faster paces. So I'd like to actually pose this question here now. How have development agencies and multilateral banks funding metro projects, embedded last mile calculations into their investment decisions? And how do you think this might evolve further? Because without really considering last mile, it's unlikely that investments in such projects would be able to be leveraged effectively. So I think I'll start first with Mr. Karo from JICA.
I would actually like to extend the question a little bit. Not just last mile, but also gender aspects, right? There are funding mechanisms and financing mechanisms have proven in the past to be able to change, legacy issues in transportation. Is that something that we recognize? Is that something that is being actively addressed? Is there a scope to do it? I think that would be interesting to hear.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm Kunro Hino, representative JICA India office. I'm heading the metro sector in JICA India office. So yeah, first of all, as the Dr. Agarwal mentioned, JICA has been supporting since 1990s for Delhi Metro for smooth construction. So Delhi Metro, accomplished their earlier completion of construction with Japanese consultants, Japanese constructors. So in that sense, the metros in India has been very, very successful. Now, actually, JICA have been supporting the metros, including Mumbai Metro Line 3, in the 6 cities, and then also added the Patna Metro last fiscal year. So in terms of construction, India is now the leading the world for the construction. Actually, now Delhi Metro is helping the other countries as well for the construction. So, and then Delhi Metro has now more than 400 kilometers, which is more than Tokyo Metro. For Tokyo Metro, it's just 196 kilometers. So it's almost double. So now I think the metro in India has facing the new phases for, how can I say, transforming themselves as well. Actually, the transportation of metro, it's transforming the society by bridging this affordable the way, the commuter way. But now, and then metro should take a role, have a role for transforming or more for the society in terms of last mile connectivity. Metro is the champion of the urban transportation. And in this, in that sense, the technology is the one of the key the points we need to address. As you may know, the government of India has been successful for the G20 leadership, and then the government launched the concept of the data for development. So the data-driven policy is really, really important, and then digital policy, including like Aadhaar, like UPI, in those the fintech is leading the world. So in that sense, I think the India can have like not just the fintech, they can have some kind of a transport stack. Now, government of India has been starting, for example, agri stack or healthcare stack. But I think like digital foundation, such as the transportation stack, can be created in India. Yeah. So, and then we have just started our collaboration with the Delhi Metro, how we can use the data or digitalization for enhanced last mile connectivity, right? So actually, we have been discussing also with the other authorities, including the Delhi government, DDC or DDT or DDA. I think they're in the same direction. Everybody is thinking the last mile connectivity is really, really important, and then the digital digitization is one of the key element to achieve for this last mile connectivity. Yeah. So actually, we just started our work with Delhi Metro. For example, in sharing the data, utilizing the data from Delhi Metro, and also from the other bus systems or e-auto or the other private companies as well. So how can we share the data, and how can we utilize the data? And also not just sharing the data, how can we enhance how can we make it more easier, for example, that payment, or maybe that can be utilized for non-fare revenue as well, including the advertisement as well. So yeah, we just started the kind of partnership with Delhi Metro, and then I hope after 6 months, 7 months, we can make it public for the other metros. Yeah, I just stop here. Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you. I think just emphasizing the importance of data-driven policy and decision making. I think that is an important aspect here. We also have Swati Khanna, who is a sector specialist in mobility from KFW. I'd like to pose the same question to you in terms of how can we embed this into decision making a little bit better, and how can we actually ensure that these investments are leveraged well?
Just 2 lines. KFW Development Bank is the financial arm of the Indo-German Development Cooperation. So the investments on behalf of the Federal Republic of Germany in the sustainable urban development or energy sector are done through KFW in India and also globally. On mobility part, KFW has currently partnered with the Government of India and Mahua specifically to the tune of roughly 3.7 billion euros, which is quite huge. Considering that mobility only became one of the focal areas in 2015-16. So that way, the investments have been quite high, and also the numbers are huge because a lot of investments and pretty high investments have gone into the metro rail systems. We are financing Surat Metro, Ahmedabad Metro Phase 2. Phase 1 is assisted by JICA. We are financing Mumbai Metro, and we are also financing Nagpur. I'm saying Nagpur the last because Nagpur is also part of the study, and I'm really looking forward to results from this study and taking it back to Maha Metro to look at how we can improve things or what they have done good or what could be improvised. But considering that we have been engaged with metros and also the numbers that Sudeep mentioned, 16 under implementation and operations at different stages, but also 24 and probably much more to come whenever we hear at numbers at different bigger events from the ministry. But if I could come in where we look that the Government of India could play a role or state governments could play a role, and how we could support the national government or the state government and the metro organizations in embedding the first and last mile connectivity and accessibility for that matter for the metro rail systems. To start with, I would refer to what Dr. Agarwal was also saying about this metro rail policy that came in, and it mentioned about multimodal integration and first and last mile connectivity. It was indeed a beautiful step that it mentioned that this should be part of your metro rail system, right? But to what extent it could operationalize or it could see that action on ground, ultimately, I'm sure many of us in the room would have seen the DPRs and would have discussed with the metro rail organizations. It limits to a very minimalistic amount, right? And that too also, if you discuss with metro rail organizations, and I'm glad that certain metro organizations are here, it refers to the so-called multimodal integration within the station box, right? But me as a metro user, I don't stay next to the station box. I stay outside, right? So where does the metro rail organization come into picture there to actually implement on the ground? This needs to be seen right at the DPR stage and right at the metro rail policy stage. I think there the national government needs to, it took a first step in 2017, but it needs to be further enhanced. There needs to be a further encouragement to the metro rail organizations, not only to the metro itself to work on it, but also with other institutions through UMTA or through other institutions, so that metro rail, because usually we hear from metro rail organizations that development authority is there, municipal corporation is there, the roads and the buses and the systems are not under our jurisdiction. So somewhere this needs to be further improvised. I would not use the word stick here, put a stick to the metro rail organizations, but make it more incentivized for the city to bring all these institutions together. But this needs to be again at the national level to make it mandatory and not just limit yourself to the box.
Because once we look at the influence area that Alok also showed in the presentation, there are different ways to look at the influence area. Every city is different. I say Nagpur is a low density city. So the distances could be even higher, larger. Whereas in Bengaluru, the distances could be very different, right? That is something. Then again, I mentioned about the DPR stage. When we appraise projects, that's really where I'm sure Kunru would have similar experience, but when we discuss with metro rail organizations and look at ridership, etc., the numbers are mind-boggling, right? And then we look at really a little more realistic numbers, that whether you are really going to achieve those numbers or whether we could bring them down, considering what are the assumptions that have gone into estimations or design of the project. Vijay is also there. When we do the modeling and all, how do the people, we do connect them with NMT walks and all, but people don't fly over crow distances. The people don't fly over, roads and all. They walk a certain distance. How those could be included in that is really critical. Apart from that, the design stage is really, again, important. I'm sure most of us at the funding agencies fear the wrath of the metro rail organizations that you're emphasizing so much on design. But design is really critical. I think it also came out from one of the WRI studies that you did with MMRDA on line 1 in Mumbai on what are the real design hindrances and obstacles that people face, especially gender-wise or age-wise, which are really critical. And these need to be included in the design. That's where, again, we, coming from funding agencies, we at times, try to forcefully put it in through different action plans and different design recommendations and specifications. But in the end, it's the city and the metro rail organizations who have to take the responsibility, the wish, want, and need to operate that system, right? VGF and subsidies and all is good, but how to optimize the revenue, again, non-fare box revenue is not the only source, right? You need to optimize your revenue streams as well. As I mentioned earlier, and also Sudeep raised this point on gender, we have quite a lot of emphasis on gender and income sensitivity in design, implementation, and operations as well. So, for example, Nagpur Metro is now operational, and we are going to very soon review the aspects of gender and income across all the stages, which will be really critical and also an input to other metro systems that we might be investing in. In fact, Hyderabad did this study on first and last mile connectivity, or actually consumer-centric behavior, and they took some initiatives and they saw their ridership jump quite a bit, I think 15 to 20%, which is quite substantial, right? So that is something which we are also looking at in Nagpur, but there is a difference over period how metros have evolved. Like Dr. Agarwal also said, earlier it was 20 years, we moved to 5, and now we are looking at 3.5, which is good. But for example, in Nagpur Metro, we emphasize that you have to do first and last mile connectivity. So Maha Metro did build wide footpaths, but was that the best decision? Coming out from your studies also, given the low density, people are probably not walking much, or people are probably walking. But to look at the ridership and the people coming to metros, there should be a balance between other options of first and last mile connectivity as well. So we are going to review that very soon. But we are also looking at Mumbai Metro Line 4, wherein we again made it mandatory that it should be a part of financing. Because if you go to municipal corporations and development authorities, they say, we'll do it, but we don't have funds. So Metro gets the funds, but all of us work together on that. So these are some of the ways that we are trying to do it. And of course, from KFW, whenever we finance a metro project, even in future, it's never going to be a plain vanilla project. That's a strategic and I think very logical decision. It shouldn't be actually really strategic also. And doing NMT and multimodal integration and first mile and last mile connectivity, even if it requires tying up with private operators, it will be an essential part of it. And I'm really looking forward to the study.
In DMRC, we have implemented this multimodal integration in about 65 stations already, subsequent to our opening and commissioning of the stations. And another 30 stations we have identified, and for this we have to take approval from the UTPAC, that is the authority. So they, in consultation with them and with the approval of LG. So we are doing that. I think. And
it's really great that you are investing in that.
Yes, it is not we are investing on that because once we have constructed the station, as you rightly told, we are limiting ourselves to the station box. And subsequently, we are moving out. Then we are seeing this how the vehicle drop off and connectivity and all, NMTs, everything. So I think we have done it already. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. That was actually quite an exhaustive answer. And I think you touched upon institutional aspects and how we implement, better decision making across different stakeholders. So actually, both of you have made my job a lot easier in transitioning to the next topic here, which is, there is an institutional issue in terms of how we can actually plan, analyze, and deploy better last mile connectivity. Now, a unified metropolitan transport authority would probably solve most of these issues, but progress has not been very encouraging, to be very honest. So I want to actually first go to Vijay Saini from ICLE and then actually also move on to Ame Gopinath from GIZ and say, until enough cities have an effective UMTA, what kind of institutional arrangements might need to be instituted so we can make this last mile planning process, more data driven?
Thank you, Alok. So the moment we try to have the parallel discussion to UMTA, it's like bringing some other thing again and facing the same challenges with. So rather than that, there is opportunity to look for the collaboration with the informal sector. So is there a mechanism that the metro authorities can collaborate with the civil societies? Can we at a station level itself try to assess what is the infrastructure requirement, not for the feeder, but then if 20% of user communities are using IPT, what will be the requirement for those IPT if e-rickshaws needs to be addressed? What will be the kind of infrastructure requirement? Can they collaborate with the financing institutions to provide low-cost loans for the people and create employment opportunity for the potential drivers? There is opportunity to for the trainings to informal sector. So that's the biggest opportunity. Apart from them, if we try to bring the other institution, then again the question goes to the financing. But then obviously maybe there need to be some sort of representation from all the relevant stakeholder on the metro board who takes responsibility for 500 meters is a walking zone for which I need to improve the infrastructure, especially for the walking and pedestrianization. I need to make those 500 meters of walking zone safe during the night time. Then from where the money is going to come, not only for initial capex, but then who is going to operate and maintain, who is responsible to spend the money during the entire tenure. So that's kind of the collaboration can address a lot of issue for as per my need. If UMTA is not working, then again, I really doubt if other institutions are going to work, especially with the municipal corporation, because they have their own written mandate. So for them to step in other shoes will be tricky. Same with the other stakeholder like traffic police, other thing. They are responsible for the traffic management. PWD is never responsible, or they don't have a mandate to provide the mobility services. So that is, I guess, opportunity to look into.
So either an UMTA or hopefully a more collaborative approach.
I guess we need to explore the innovative way of the collaboration, and also includes what is a new innovative way to include the startups, because they can get things done at very faster pace, and also they can keep a check on the level of service for the last and first mile connectivity. Also the responsiveness to the market demand is quite fast compared to the government agency. So maybe just there will be need for a lot of brainstorming, but if we are able to institutionalize those business model or new operational model for the last mile services, that can be a game changer.
So to begin with, what I want to highlight here is also the Parliamentary Standing Committee on Home Affairs in its 2021 report on the traffic situation in Delhi, where they also mentioned about how multimodal integration at metro stations need to encourage commuters to use public transport and discourage the use of private vehicles for long distance. However, the committee also raised concerns that the lack of coordination between the various project executing agencies could affect the swift implementation of these plans. So clearly, let it be NUTP policy or for that matter, the metro policy, and even the parliamentary committee also is aware of where the institutions lack or for where the implementation lacks. And when it comes to UMTA, we have seen, like, apart from Chennai, I was just talking to Sonal as well when we were just walking and we were just talking about how UMTA has been defunct, or for that matter, KMT, the Kochi Metropolitan Transport Authority. It's been like around 2 years or so, but then it doesn't have powers, and also to be very blunt, it's toothless, right? And somewhere, although we have these policies, but then when it comes to implementing an institution like UMTA, which has a lot of responsibility, not just with implementation, but then also operations as well. Like, that's something that we also need to closely look at. And talking about data, I think this is something very important. Like, when we look at metro systems, it's mostly a myopic approach, right? We just bothered about the station infrastructure. But then when we talk about metro station, it's basically providing services to businesses, institutions, colleges, or for that matter, various other needs. It's connecting. And when we are capturing the data sets, we are largely looking at those data which is easily available for us. So a large section of the data is again missed out. And basically wherever we can easily achieve those data. So identifying those important samples, basically to have a holistic approach, and also to sort of cater to those commuters who are not currently on the system, but then to bring them, like as Swati was also mentioning, different genders, age groups, or for that matter, disables. So these are those categories which we haven't even reached out to. For that matter, let's even move a little from metro systems to bus systems. We can even see how the lower income groups, the public transport connectivity is very poor, right? So eventually these systems are actually planned in silos. They're not integrated. And somewhere we also need to look for those data sets which also give that holistic view, how we bring them to the system and also provide services so that we're not missing out on anyone. And I think for this, mobility as a service is a great option. And we have seen how by bringing the service providers and commuters on one single platform and providing services can make a huge difference. And I think the last point that I would also want to emphasize is on when it comes to implementation, there are couple of policies which are very well framed, but then when it comes to implementation, I think the institutes who are accountable for implementing these policies, that's not something that we're looking into. So the institutes who are supposed to implement, they should be made accountable as well. And also when it comes to service providers who provide these last mile connectivity for the metro systems, we have seen Yulu, Bounce, who have been providing services, but then over the time, I think it hasn't sustained. I think they just wither out or they just die. And I think let it be these individual institutes, for that matter, metro or municipal corporation, or let it be the transport authorities. I think there should be again some onus on how these last mile service providers also survive and how they cater to these needs.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, again, quite a comprehensive answer. I want to take your point actually about integration between bus and metro systems to make sure that they work in a more complementary fashion. I'd like to actually move this to Bravi Gadepalli, because you've worked on, both bus transit and metro systems across multiple cities in India. How do you envisage that they can work in a more complementary fashion, feed into each other? Because, one issue we've been seeing with feeder buses is that a lot of these operators have very high capacity buses, which may not always be the best suited to providing feeder services to metro.
Yeah, thanks, Alok. So first is, so our approach towards feeder buses is generally that, now we have a metro, let's have a feeder bus to the metro. But wherever I analyze it, it actually doesn't work like that. Because the city already has a bus service. Actually, some cities are implementing a metro even without a bus service. That's a different debate altogether. But in majority of the cities, there is a bus service in place. And metros generally come on the high density corridors where there is generally the most available bus service. So if you add on one layer of extra feeders, then it is actually not matching with the overall city requirement. In Bangalore, as well as in Chennai actually, where we did detailed analysis of the bus routes, there is a bus service, it's just that it's not frequent enough. Our bus routes are actually very long in general. So the way our bus route network itself is designed has fundamental flaws, which means that you don't have high frequency services. It's just that The captive users are mostly using it. So that is one. The second thing is it costs money to. I mean, there is feeder service and there is also high frequent service you need, and both require money. And currently, our bus agencies don't actually have funding from anywhere. So, and this is not minuscule, trivial money that we're talking about. In Bangalore, actually, I'm working with the ADB Technical Assistance Program, where the consultant has worked out that every station requires 50 to 70 crores of investment for multimodal integration on the physical infrastructure itself. That is actually 20% of the metro cost. You're talking about 20% of the extra metro cost on the capex, and then there is a recurring operational expenditure also. And we somehow hope that it happens in our business as usual way of doing it. So you need actually special MMI finance to be activated. So we have finance for metro, some for electric buses, but not where we want it. But there's nothing for multimodal integration. So in Chennai, World Bank is actually trying to, the upcoming World Bank program under, it's called Urban Mobility and Spatial Development. There is a specific MMI component within that, and it is being channeled through the Unified Metropolitan Transport Authority. A lot of focus so far has been on operationalizing KUMTA, but the next focus will be on implementation. In Bangalore, ADB is actually developing a program at the state level to be taken forward. Even there is a big MMI component where there is a physical infrastructure operational integration. And I also wanted to quickly touch upon the technology integration, where it is all there and it's just our limitation in thinking that is stopping us from integrating several modes. We already have open loop cards and mobile ticketing, but it's just that we are not thinking about integrated fare products for the users. The other thing I wanted to talk about is the physical infrastructure. So there is this the catchment area discussion already came up, but just the metro station block itself, the design, a lot of times we are just thinking on the metro and it will land in an island where traffic on both sides. And Vijay actually worked and helped think through a different way of designing things. I don't know if he's talking about it today, but so that's something we are doing. Design issues, Swati also mentioned, there is a lot of work to be done there. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. I think that's interesting, looking at a slightly longer term planning system and how we might need to maybe reconceptualize a lot of bus routes in the first place.
I think the next question we have is on the gender aspect. Sonali, I think we have talked about a few aspects, but what I would really particularly like you to focus on is that what do you think are the top 3 or 4 priorities on a gender perspective that needs to be addressed? And where do you think that there is that opportunity to kind of integrate it into a policy sort of a conversation? Sonali, would you like to go first?
A lot of people have talked about station design, and I think one aspect of station design I would like to focus upon is women tend to feel unsafe on streets when the streets are inactive. Now that's a fact. Now, how do you make sure that your station design is very is cognizant of this fact? If you look at just in Delhi, the stations like Qutub Minar, which has high boundary walls, or Jamia Nagar, which has high boundary walls, it actually restricts women not to use it maybe after 8 or 9 p.m. But suppose a metro station which opens right on the street is much more active, and women tend to use it more. And so whenever we are talking about gendered aspects, we have to talk about how women are using the metro station, especially after dark. Which are the metro stations they choose to, say, wait for, or to pick door, or even use other last mile modes? And how do they move? And your study, WRI study, is talking about how most of the people are walking, but we are not really thinking about walking. You have very good data on how much cost is like people are willing to spend. What if we were to value walking also? We need to account time lost, or the business, the value, the economic value we are losing when we are not investing in walking infrastructure. We are talking about TOD, there's a value to it. We have to increase the business along that street. But unless we put a value to walking, how much time are we losing, human time, and how much business we are losing, actually, people will not invest in walking infrastructure. And it's at the end of the day, businesses, revenue matters. Fine, then let's find a way to put a value to that. In station design, one of the other aspects is that Safetyman did a study at Chennai metro station, one of the metro station, which is Washam and Pet. It's right now being taken up for MMI, multimodal integration. Metro station, when you are designing it, you have to leverage the existing network, be it a local train or even your bus network. These are the networks that are running from 20 years. And how do you make sure that the services, a commuter, like Swati said, as a commuter, I will not choose one. I will not be just a user of a metro use. I will also use bus. I will also use a local train. So how do you really, again, it's a station design principle, because in our survey we found that people are afraid to go to that metro station. Not really afraid, they were apprehensive. They were like, we can only see parking. The huge space that a metro station has, it's only used for parking. It is only for car owners, or it is only for people who have cars. Now that was a very surprising study for me. But then that talks about your station design is very important. And last but not the least, I will still talk about redressal systems, complaint redressal system, which I feel, say, Delhi Metro has done fantastically. You have a good redressal system. You have to extend it to the other last mile modes. You have in your DPRs, in your TORs, when you're giving out tenders. I think the private sector and the government sector have to come together to tackle some of these problems. If women are reporting problem they are saying that they feel unsafe. Now, how are you redressing it? It is an important mechanism. So we have to focus on that. Thank you.
I think I'm just going to talk a little bit about data. The digitalization of public transport ticketing is creating opportunities for us to collect age, gender, and ability data at the point of sale of tickets. And I think, and I'm going to build on what Ma'am Farah said, is that one of the largest data sets is with the metro rail agencies themselves. A very interesting project by GIZ in Mobus in Bhubaneswar tagged the electronic ticketing machines, gender tagged electronic ticketing machines, which would provide data on ridership by gender, boarding alighting patterns, as well as time, and they would be time stamped. This provides a wealth of data to a public transport agency. I'm given to believe that the National Common Mobility Card, for example, in Delhi, is going to use Aadhaar. I will not go to data and data privacy, but is going to use that in order to register for the card, therefore enabling the agency to have age and gender data at point of sale of ticket. What if, and I think this is also part of some of the work that we are doing with the Delhi government this year, that looks at mainstreaming gender data in their ticketing, as well as using it to improve safety. So what if our metro cards at the time of a top-up started collecting 3 data points: age, gender, ability, right? And what would that do then is provide wealth of data on ridership, because ridership right now is a number, right? And we don't have it disaggregated by age, we don't have it disaggregated by gender as well as ability. That itself could become the starting point over which commuter surveys could complement for specifics. So I think I just want to focus on this piece, because this I don't believe is expensive to do. I think it just needs some good technology experts to work with our metro rail agencies in order to mainstream this within their systems.
Thanks, Sonal. I think that's a very interesting point that you had brought up, and I do want to kind of build up on that. And this is a question that is going to be based on data for Vijay and Raj, for you as well. We have talked a lot about the data that is available with the metro agencies and the transport agencies, but that data is of people who have already or are already convinced about utilizing the metro. We can use that data, we can improve it, we can respond to demands, etc. But we are not we are not tackling the bigger question, right? Which is the people who may not want to use the data. What do you think could be the sources of data to be able to even capture that understanding of what works, what doesn't work for the people who are not convinced yet?
Yeah, that's a very important point. So basically my background, just so people who don't know me, is I was a consultant with IBA Group for a long time. I was a associate director. And for the last 1 year, I'm a professor of practice at IIT Delhi. So as an academic, I'm going to be a little pedantic about it. But when I was at IBA Group, we did the ADB project, Bangalore, and that's where we looked at the integrations, the conflicts and other things. So the point I was trying to is, when people talk about we do multimodal integration, what we see in Hyderabad, there's a station which is 6 meters away from the service road. But if you just want to cross it, it takes about 5 minutes because traffic is continuously flowing and you're actually in it's very unsafe conditions. Okay, so we looked at number of conflicts rather than MMI in terms of distance or any of those things. So the objective is to reduce your conflicts. Now coming to the data question, I think this whole conversation we are making a basic assumption. The basic assumption is there is demand and the demand is not met because last mile connectivity is not there. But is it a valid assumption is something I think you need to ask from your data. Okay, because what we know is most of our cities, Nagpur kind of cities, Indore kind of cities, the average distance from household surveys is 5.5 kilometers. Yeah. So humans are not traveling more than 5.5 kilometers. And all of us know that if it's 5 it's not a surprise that KMR's Kochi is not doing well. We knew it even before it started out. Most of us said Jaipur, Kochi, all this state will have problems because the distance, average distance of travel is so less. And when you have 5 kilometers, nobody is going to use the metro, right? So how will metro be successful? Over time, people will move away. It will create a sprawl and the sprawl will help the metro to succeed. Okay, probably. But it takes a long time for that sprawl to happen, right? So let's understand that as our thing and the assumption that, okay, if we do this and Kochi, the fact that they said 12% only, even though they provided good metro feeder services, only 12% of the people are actually using the, makes sense, right? We are very clearly seeing from your data also 75% of people are walking. Even our data, when we did that things, 60 to 70% were walking. So we know most of the people who are wanting to use the metro are staying close to the metro. The reason is there's a transfer cost, right? Anytime you change any mode, there's a transfer cost. So I am not going to, if I'm traveling 10 kilometers, I'm not going to stay 5 kilometers away to take the 10-kilometer road. So let's look at data from that perspective, right? And that's the one I'm sure your data has it and would be nice to know so that we give recommendation to the other 24 cities not to do metro, probably, right? So it's frustrating for us to see metro being done in cities that we know will not succeed, okay? And we don't understand why the agencies like KFW and JICA are funding it, okay? DPRs are made up stuff in India, right? Even in US, in California, it was completely made up data to make sure some of these things go because the agencies put pressure. So it would be nice for the lending agencies to look at the DPRs properly and say, does it make sense? Now, coming to the actual question that you have to do non-metro survey. So we did a non-metro survey. Okay. So we did a metro survey and we did a non-metro user survey. In the metro survey, what they said is the main reason for them to use the metro is savings in travel time. In the non-metro service, the main reason not to use it is too costly. Okay. Right. And we do know that's the one place where I have challenge with your data, whatever you showed. You're showing that less than 10K people, about 9% are using metro. And even 10,000 to 20,000, a lot of people are using. Our own studies from IIT and other places shows that less than 20,000 people don't use metro. It's like less than 2% or something like that. Okay. So now the conversation needs to be saying that, okay, where are we successful? Is there a real demand? If not, what is the way to create demand? And what is the way to create a demand is the TOD. But the TOD comes through market forces, right? It doesn't come just by, it's not organic. It comes through market forces. It is organic, but it takes the time and it takes about 10 to 15 years. Now the question is, how long are we willing to lose money on operational cost, knowing that we'll lose money, right? And that's something I think we need to start talking about rather than, and the other conversation I want to have is the fact that we are saying feeder services to metro itself shows that we are failing our objective. It is transportation choices, right? As Mr. Hux told correctly. So if you're saying the city has to have transportation choices, it has to be UMTA, right? And we do see that conversations between metro agency and bus agency, where the bus agency feels the metro is a new upstart who is becoming the big brother. Okay, so there is a lot of discomfort in that whole conversation, and it is bureaucracy that is leading it. It's not the technocrats who are leading it, right? So if the technocrats come together and say, hey, we need to create a public transport system for the whole city, where should I put the metro? Where should I put the bus? We're not talking about it. We are saying that, okay, we need to connect the whole city with the metro. And then trying to put, like the other conversation with DMRCL was every 500 meters I want to have a metro. And it is crazy costly and no value at all, right? So you got to look at what is the distance that people, and whenever you talk about a catchment area, I think the first conversation you need to do is do a survey of the catchment area and say what is the distance they are traveling. If the distance they are traveling is only 5 kilometers as this one, they're not going to, there's no need to put feeder services and all that, right? And even if you put feeder services, you'll increase it by 5% or something. They talk about two-wheeler parking, and we see the same thing with two-wheeler parking. The number of people you're going to add because adding two-wheeler parking is not worth the cost. Okay, but so many metros talk about, oh, we are going to give two-wheeler parking and all that. I took more of my time.
No, very valid points. Raj?
So, thank you for the invite. And for a person who is making money out of data analytics, I am the most skeptic person about usage of data. That's how I'll start, because obviously it will be like, should I use it is the question, right? Like, so because see, actually, Sudeep, you had touched that point. One of the points that I wanted to discuss is that we call it as survivorship bias. You take the data from the people who are using it and trying to, do all the analysis and trying to figure out what they want, what they are doing, why they are doing. But that's not the people whom we want to know, right? Like, so we want to know the other one. We call it a survivorship bias. And anyway, now the reasons why I'm skeptical is that it's not just that metro or anything. I've been working with data related, works with the different forms of government, like state government, city governments, and everything in public agencies. See, there are two concepts that we have to understand. One is data, and second is data process. And what does that mean? I'll come back to that. See, first is data. We always talk about what data do we need? What do we have that? Do we have the economic data? Do we have the population data? Do we have, who is coming? Where do you have the roads? Do you have this, that, etc.? That is, somehow we can figure out proxies for it. We can come up with it, and everything around that we can always bring it. But it is always the problem of data process. What that means is that understanding and living with it, right? Like, see, brilliant paper from Alok and team. It's Alok and team. Do you think that this kind of analysis would be replicated at a government institution? See, that is the biggest question we need to ask. Like, I've been giving out all these beautiful analysis and everything. I did recently with some satellite images. I did a workshop for government for 3 days. For 3 days, nothing came out of it. You can have, see, even if I provide data in front of you, who is going to process it and how are they going to process it? See, if I give data to, say, Alok and team, it's not that he is going to take that data as it is and going to do, with this data, I'll do this process, etc., etc. He's going to, there is a knowledge process involved. There's a huge knowledge process involved. And I feel that most institutions in the country are not ready for it. Right? Like, so anyway, I'll go into that. But see, first is data. Of course, the project, if you want to find out all your potential user base, of course, one of the things is that everyone talks about land use, but they always we have to go beyond that. There is population data. There is a block level population data, enumeration block level data. I've rarely seen institutions using it because you have to buy it, you have to get it, and all those things. And then economic census is an underutilized data. There is a directory of establishments. Every state actually has these factory data sets where, like, they have establishments and everything where they mark how many people work, and you can get all those things and you can create your models. But the thing is that will give you potential. But then, of course, the actuals for you, that would be, you are not ridership data, but you have to talk about the people who are not utilizing it, right? Like, so you have to look at, a non-metro survey, and of course you have to look at Google Maps, You have to use some kind of road surveys. You have to figure out, for example, Uber also has data on where they are booking and where they are. You start using it, right? Like, so these are your potential base, right? Like, so these are the people that you have to come up. One problem with surveys is that if you are asking questions like how are you commuting, how much distance you are commuting, you'll get a decent answer. But why? If you ask the question why, then there will be another problem where you will get bias. Right? Like, I mean, if I ask why question over here, you'll have one bias. And if I go to the next room and I ask the same why question, like, I mean, for example, why did you choose roti over this one, etc. Like, I mean, these are like, at the time of the survey, what is the mentality of the commuter? That would be reflected in the survey. And it is not necessary that it will be the actual problem that they are facing. I might be having a different problem, but I would be reporting a different problem. Not because I'm planning to report it as a problem, but it's how my psychology works. But anyway, regarding the questions on cost of data, and if you want to do it, if you really like, I mean, see, the success usually is, I keep it as, it's arbitrary number, but I keep it as 5%. In the sense, like 5% of the institutions that use GIS data, big data, and all those things have faced success. Majority of them, it will be like, we can do this, we will do this, it is going to happen, this data is coming, that data is coming, we'll be amazing. But most of the times it's a problem. The problem I see is that, I mean, with respect to cost also, Dr. Obi Agarwal already started about, common institutions, right? Like, I mean, without that, you will have problem with the data also. The data that you require, like what Sudeep mentioned, is the data that is outside of it. And Metro is not going to have any jurisdiction on it. Metro agency is not going to have any jurisdiction on it. You won't get the data from auto riders. You're not going to get the data from bus. If the bus agency is not going to implement it, then why would the Metro agency get it? You won't get any data on pedestrian access unless you do a costly survey or something like that. These are with different agencies, and we have to understand that complexity. So if that complexity has to be solved, the single department has to go away. At least at a corporation level, you have to have a unified data center. Without that, nothing is going to move. If a single department is going to think about it, they will think about it from their perspective. Instead of what works for the city or what works for the people, they will be looking at what works for their department and what can work in their department, right? Like, it's not even about like whether the success of the department, it's like, what can I do kind of thing. But this data process is something that I wanted to talk about, right? Like the process behind collection of data, the rational understanding of data. So that is actually the most toughest challenge that I have heard of. So you have to think about, data sources, we don't have to worry too much. We have to worry about the institution and the people around it. Who is going to process this data? And are they ready for this? See, the survivorship bias. For example, I'll take this. If a metro organization if you are going to give this data to metro organization, they wouldn't have come up with survivorship bias, right? Like, why Sudeep is bringing it? Because he has been working on it for so long, is an expert in it. Is that expertise there in the metro organization is something that we have to do. If we want to do that, you have to start thinking about capacity building, and you have to work around that. Now, so because of data can never be complete.
Raj, we just have.
Sorry. I'll finish with one line. Yeah, sorry, I'm very skeptical about that. But anyway, the problem is that we shouldn't be attempting a lot of perfectionism in this, and data-driven decision making should not be. It's not exactly data-driven decision making. It should be more of data-aided conversations, which lead to decision making. In the sense, like, don't take data as it is. Bring that data in front. Argue about it. Rationally think about it, and that thought process is what's going to give you. Because see, already I think someone mentioned. There is this survey that they did and the survey that you did, and now there is like differences between them. This is the confusion that you have to, instead of this huge cost of bringing massive data sets, etc., do trial and error, put a bus and see if it is working, run it for 30 days. If it works, it works. And that's it. But anyway, it's a cheaper method. No, I'm just saying it's a very
different views, but appreciate both views. All right, I think we have overrun time quite a bit. But it was really intriguing conversation, and thank you everyone for the patience and the time taken to kind of contribute to this conversation. Thank you so much. We hope to we are hoping to kind of consolidate some of the things that we have learned from this conversation into a document. We will share it with you. Thank you so much.